Okay, so now that I've got the forward part of the hull sheeted in, I need to cut a anchor house here. The anchor way opening in the hull, which I can now cut in. And so I just tape that off, and then I'm going to scribe it like I did with the knife, and then I'm just going to drill through along and just remove that plastic. And if I need to get a Dremel in there, I will, and I just need to frame it in on the inside so it goes up. It's sort of, the house hole goes up to the deck here and out the port side of the bow like this. Okay, so I'm just finishing up the hawse hole here, the anchor way. So you can see it's framed in with some sheet. Notice how I leave a little bit of a handle protruding out. I can trim off later. Like here I exaggerated a bit, but it's only scrap, right? But it's the way you can frame into a hull like this rather than trying to push a little tiny piece in and having it fall inside or just trying to handle it. So I just trial and error, just eyeball that, cut, trim, cut, trim till it fits the shape, and then what I'm going to do is just put it in there and just capillary in some nice fresh thin solvent. Maybe I'll get a little bit on there. Notice how I pre-drilled a hole first with a Dremel bit, with a little grinder pointer kind of wheel, or you can use a drill bit, just so that when I put the hole back in there, I'll be able to run the chain through. Okay. Okay, so I just want to show you this here now. So I've got the anchorway chain, or the house or hawse, you know, however you want to pronounce that. Maybe I'm not pronouncing it right, but so I've framed that in and I drilled a hole up through the deck there. Okay, and I just hand twist like this. Well, I do a couple smaller pilot holes first, and then if you're really careful and the bit's really sharp, then it'll cut pretty good. Or you can just do it with a knife, like a number 11, just sort of twist and rough it in, and then when you lay in some thicker solvent, it kind of, geez, I love this solvent, the plastic. I know I harp about it and preach it a lot, but you know, you can thicken this too, as people have said in the past. You can add plastic bits and it makes it into a goop, a kind of a liquid plastic. But anyway, so what I did was I took a 3/16 rod or tube, okay, and just slipped it in, okay. It was, excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold. I got a little bit of the sniffles. I'm sorry if that's a distraction. So 3/16, 2/26 tube, just push down in through there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a bit of a saddle around here. There'd be like an iron kind of bolster sort of saddle for the chain to run over, you know, so it doesn't wear the deck, even though it's steel. So I'm going to use this here, number 213 100 thou rod. And what I do is, like I've shown this before and I'll show it again, is you just take this rod, and if you're really slow with it, like here, it'll take this drill bit. This is 3/16 drill bit, the same diameter as this tube. And you just slowly bend it, like just a little bit at a time. Just be gentle, okay? A little bit at a time, slowly. This is the beauty of evergreen. It has that softness to it, okay? So just coax it along, gentle like. Mind you, if you're in an ice cold shed, I don't know if this is going to work, but as long as it's room temperature. And there you can see that I've just created a beautiful U-shaped rod, and it didn't really deform like the diameter of the rod. You notice that? Like it stayed uniform. Isn't that neat? And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay this piece in here like this. I'm going to cut it shorter. I'm going to glue this in, and then I'm going to wick in quite a bit of cement, and then just tape it down, and then I'm just going to deal with it tomorrow. Like once it hardens up good, I'm just going to carve it down some and file it down just because the chain's going to run from here to the center line where the winch is, okay? Or not a windlass, but a chain winch, okay? Okay, so there's a big cable kind of clevis built, a big cast steel sort of clevis like this on the front, on the top of the bow. You can see it here in this photo where it runs a lot of cables through. So I've used here 1/8 rod number 214. And once again, if you're gentle and you just coax it slowly, you can bend evergreen around an object. I like to use drill bits for certain sizes. It's just rough. It doesn't have to be perfect. Just get something that looks the right size and then just work it gently, right? Don't try to do it all at once. You'll snap it. But if you do it gently, you can bend any rod, any size. And the beauty, once again, see how it holds its diameter well? It doesn't crush and buckle inside the apex of the curve like that, which is nice. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to lay that up and then I'm going to mark that on the bow and drill the holes. I'm going to just slide this right into place. And then I'm going to build that fairing out of sheet to match up to it, okay? Okay, so I want to show this part because it's very important, okay? Because this is the method I'm going to use for a lot of parts on the tug from here on in, okay? So I need this fairing to fit along the top of the bow here. So I just trial and error cut a piece of paper. You just keep cutting it. Just go with instinct. Use these if you have to. And just get a piece of paper that will generally fit the curve that you want. You just do dry runs. And then I've got it right here on paper. I figure that this will work fine. So what I'm going to do is I just tape this down, the paper. I'm going to gently cut this with a number 11 blade. I'm going to make a template out of 20 thou. Okay? 20 thou plastic. Now, I don't know, it might be a bit heavier than scale maybe, but you got to make compromises because you're going like this over the model. I got a lot of building to do and I don't want to mangle it. Okay, so here's another important process or tip. So before I lay these fairings in, there's a bit of a compound curve to them. And this flat piece is okay to do it. But what I did was I just rounded a little bit of the bottom here. Just because as it starts to turn the corner up at the bow here, it tapers off like that. But you just figure that out with paper and trial and error, right? So I need like a waterway or a piece of rod to glue this fairing in place later. So what I'm going to do is take some 30 thou rod, okay, number 210, 30 thou rod. See, all of it comes in handy eventually as you build models and build up your inventory of evergreen stock. So I just tagged it here, okay, and I'm going to curve this rod on the inside of this line that I drafted. And I'm going to use a little bit of this solvent. I'm just going to capillary it in as I hold it in place. Do one little section at a time, okay? Make sure that it's nice and symmetrical, like curved, I mean. Okay, it's got a nice curve in it. Make sure you stay on the inside of the line towards the center of the deck. So what that will do is give you a nice glue bead to lay your fairing in. So when you go to lay this in, like once that's all dry, and you go to lay this, you can push it against that little rod bead and bend it over and capillary glue in there and hold it in place. And that way you can get a bit of the bend in here at the bow too, and you just get a really nice glue joint there. And the rod is just merely a waterway on the boat. It's prototypical, okay? Okay, so just a little jump forward here. I had to do these fairings off camera. This is too fiddly and my hands are in the way and just very difficult to film. But you can see, so what I did was I started the piece that looked like this, right? And I just glue it in like that first and let it set. Do some dry runs so you make sure you can curl it around and it stays snug to the deck. And then once the bow part was glued, I just wrapped it, pushed it up against that dowel on the inside, right? And just wicked in glue and she went together nicely. Now, I want to show you how to heal wounds or just unsightly seams and stuff. Okay, once again, it's a steel boat, so you can turn these into weld seams if you put enough cement on them and just perforate them with a tool. But anyway, you can see I just started 20 thou right here. Number 218, 20 thou rod is great. I go through a lot of this, by the way, and 15 thou too, which you can get through Plastruct. Evergreen doesn't have 15 thou. The smallest I have is 20. But Plastruct, the equivalent of this, okay, which is I can show it to you. It's these guys right here. Plastruct. You can see they're 15 thou. I think they might even have 10 too, like 2.5 mil, but it's really small. Really nice stuff. Okay. And so what I do is I start a piece there, touch of glue, set it in, wait 10, 15 seconds, and then I just pull it along. As you can see, there's a little bit of a seam here. A little bit of a, it's not that bad. If you sand that, it'll probably let it go away, but I just want to clean that up. So I'll just pull that along just an inch at a time. Each increment you see on this deck is about an inch. And then I just push it in with my pick, gently push it in. It just snugs in beautifully. I just chase it along. You get a feel for the cement too. Like when you get down to 20 thou, you're starting to get to the point where the solvent will melt it, which is, you want that. Like you want to have that ability. When you're working with liquid solvent like this in Evergreen, you learn lots of little tricks and little anomalies that work in your favor that make for like miniature welding like this, which is just like, this is the perfect medium for doing steel boats. Okay, so now I've cleaned that up. I'll just nip that off. Save that little piece. Make sure that that's in tight. Sometimes I find if you just give it a wet wipe too, it helps to kind of blend things in nice. And cleans up the bead nicely. Okay, so you can see that fairing is sorry, let me just zoom the camera out for a second here. So you can see that the fairing is starting to come into shape there. You see the big anvil ring, and I'm pretty pleased so far. So this is a little bit high here, but what I'll do is I'm going to pencil mark that or just tape that off with some Tamiya tape and then just sand it and knife it down so it's nice and flush. Oh, and let me point out something that happened here. So when I was putting cement on this side, I guess it softened this ring and it was under tension. Remember this big anvil ring I put in? And it split, and I went, oh no, please don't, right? Like it split almost halfway through, and I thought it was going to split right through and pop and spring up. I thought, oh no, because that would be a nightmare to try and fix that. So what I did was I let it sit for about an hour, I came back and I took a piece of 20 thou and I just sanded it like a wedge and put a little bit of cement on each side of the wedge, not on the ring, and I just pushed it down in and I healed the wound there nice. And I'm going to leave this piece till tomorrow. I'm just going to trim that down and sand it, and that'll disappear. So you can heal wounds very easily with styrene plastic like this and solvent. That's what I like about it. But you're starting to come together, eh? Isn't that neat? Okay, so I want to show you how I'm going to treat these rub rails on the side of the tug that they go along the just above the water line. I'll show you where they go a little bit later. So I've sanded these down. I've rounded the corners off. This is this strip here, number 168, 80 thou by 188. Okay. And I roughed them all up with sandpaper, then I stroked them down with some emery cloth just to knock the fuzzies off them. So what I want to do is put a bunch of dings and dents, like these would be big heavy rubber. So I'm going to take this Dremel tool, okay, it's got this round coarse bit, about a 1/4 inch ball on it. And I'm just going to put it on a low speed like this, and I'm just going to bounce the bit up and down like just randomly, okay? And it'll leave a bunch of random perforations in the rubber side. I'll show you it close up. Okay, so you see that? So what I'll do is I'll just stroke that just to knock off any fuzzies. And then when that gets painted and weathered, you know, like those, it'll look like really banged up weathered rubber rails on the side of the tug, okay? Okay, so you can see I've got the breakwater fairing all done with 15 by 60 thou strip along the top there. I went to 15 thou, it's just more rigid, and I had to relief cut just the outside apex of the curve here just to get this bend on top, and then the rest bends okay. It goes quite quick, like just getting it started, you leave it for a bit, for 10 minutes or so, and then just start wicking in cement and chasing it along, and it goes on pretty nice. And I use this, believe it or not, I use this ruler quite a bit. And the glue just comes right off, it flakes off, but it's really good for, you know, going like this, pressing in and truing the edges and stuff like that while it's still soft. Now, I'm also doing the, oops, I better nip that off. This is the final piece I had to put on there just to now, that's done, this fairing. Then there's the quarterdeck fairing here as well, which is getting kind of complicated back here. Now, I must say that at this point, the dimensions of this boat is not perfect. Like, it might be a little bit shorter than I anticipated, but not by much, but maybe by 6 feet or so. And that's the way it is when you build from photographs, and if you don't spend enough time with the draft, then, you know, but you never get it perfect unless you got a, you know, the proper blueprint or drawing. But nevertheless, you can still get a good model when you draft from a photograph, and this one's shaping up quite nice. I like it. Now, this back area of the stern is quite complicated. You can see here, just on this photo, that, okay, so there's that big rub rail that I've already put on here. Here's the deck. It's got quite a low, I guess if I can call this a gunwale, it's almost just up to the knees. And I notice it's painted yellow on the inside for safety, but man, I guess it's for ease of work and accessing barges and stuff, but boy, that could be a dicey situation. And I bet you the rear deck's awash a lot too. Because if you look at these scuppers here, they're almost in rough water. They're going to be taking water in and out of there. But anyway, you can see the rear here. So there's the rubber. It's a big old tire there, but underneath there's a big piece of steel pipe there, and then the fairing kind of tucks over. I'll get to that, but right now I've got this tube. Actually, this was tube because it's not thick enough rod, but I just slip a rod inside of it just to make it solid, and then, but I don't glue it though, I just loosen it so when I bend it, that rod slips a bit on the inside and you can get a nice curve like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue this in. I got to kind of, excuse me, I have to sort of wing it here a little bit based on the photo, but I'm going to glue, so I got that right angle. See the right angle there at the end of the scupper? It's here and there. I cut this long enough to tuck in behind it, just to sort of hold that bend in there. And I'll just wick cement into this and seize it in place. And then I'm just going to have to build the fairing. I want to try to stay away from any epoxy putty or filler if I can. As you may know, I only use it if I absolutely have to. I try to do everything with plastic and weld because you can do cool stuff with plastic and weld. You can fill big gaps and shape parts, you know, that you never thought you could. But that's what I'm going to do, start with that, and then I'm going to have to build the rear of the transom sort of over top of that, I guess. And then I got to think about bending this fairing, curving it in. It sort of comes in a bit, but I can probably wrap a bit of it over this tube too. We'll see how that goes. It's not going to be exact, but it'll be good enough, right? So it's a replica. It's a scale replica, really, of the ship. And I'm pretty happy with its progress so far, so we'll just keep moving right along then. Okay, so how's everybody doing? So moving right along, so still working on the hull here. I just want to show you a couple of things. So this rear transomer is actually quite complicated, but you can see that I got this round bar pipe in. Quite beefy, the rear end of these tugs, eh? Boy, they really are built to handle a lot of abuse, and they're just very brutish. When you build them, you realize how tough they're built for a good reason, right? Okay, so I had to make up this little block. This is like a bollard block, okay, and it goes on the rear of the tug like this. And thankfully, I had my trusty little disc sander to make this block up. I laminated 4 pieces of 80 thou together, just really slathered on the glue, squeezed it together, a fair bit larger than this, and then just touched it on the disc sander, you know, made a nice sort of rectangle block, and then drafted lines on it and just sanded the angles. So I'm pretty happy with that. And I have a bit of an angle at the back here because the rear sort of deck, the way it rolls over, it rolls up on top of this. So I'm going to glue that down into there, and then I can drill a hole for a bollard. Now the trick is getting this shape. I have to cut a big fairing for the rear here. It's going to be a bit complicated. But one of the tips that if I can give you is to do a paper rub, like, you know, like halfway. I think I showed this. Like if you want to pick a line out like that, see how it leaves a line, and then make sure you mark a center line, and you just need half, and then you cut that out. You just fold that. You just fold it in half, and then cut it out, and then unfold it, and you'll get the inside diameter of this pipe will get you started. And now I've gotten to this. I've had to do this 3 or 4 times, so I'd like to get it right. So I've almost got this template where I want it, at least to fit in here, and then it kind of wraps over this pipe like that. So I'm going to have to draft in and then figure out how this works, because this is wider here like this. And once I get this half measure done, then I'll check the other side, and then I'll draft that in and then cut that out. And then once I'm happy with this fit, I'll use tape to fit it over the rear of the tug like this. And when I'm happy with it, I'll leave a little excess down here I can trim off later. Then I'll transfer this onto a piece of 15 thou. And then cut it out, and then just start gluing it in place and working it in, okay? Just to quickly just summarize on this waterline hull so far. So it was on 3/8 7-ply plywood, which you can get at a hobby shop by Midwest. Okay, and the reason for that was to prevent warping, because when you build up and you start to build up the hull, it tends to pull on a plastic plate, and you can end up with a warp, and it just kills the whole deal, right? But you can see there's all different thicknesses in here, and you just figure those out as you go. Like it's not like you don't have to know all this stuff in your head. You just figure out as you go and you build. If you built a model kit, it's similar, but you get to make all your own parts. But you can see where, you know, I'm adding trim. There's quite a bit to this hull. And I did this upper fairing piece here with a 15 by 60 trim on top. It's all shapeable, bendable plastic. Like, that's the beauty of evergreen, right? There's some camber in the decks now. You know, it's subtle, but it really makes a difference, you know. Okay. I even went as far as to make little brackets with, you know, just the compass pointer, poor man's rivets I call them, or bolts. You know, it's 1/87 scale. The real challenge I'm having right now is doing this rear fairing. It's this complex compound curved plate, but I'll get there. I got a paper template. I'm almost there. And I had to put this block here. This is like a bowler block. A bowler goes in there, and then that sheeting goes over the top here. So I'll make this all out of paper, and then I'll merge it into this. See how I left this loose? Like, I leave loose ends like that when I'm not sure yet or haven't gotten to that part. Because you can basically weld, cut and weld. You can basically build with evergreen plastic, just like you would if you were a steel fabricator. It's the same process, because you use, you know, this, like, this is your weld, right? And you can even introduce beads through rod, like 15 thou, 20 thou rod. So, because there's like rod in here, there's a thin 20 thou rod in the corner of this fairing to the hull, which cleans it up really nice. And on the inside too. Okay. And then furthermore, I like to just draft on a grid of any size. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, this is inch squares. I haven't done the square part here, but inch spacings, so that when you start to decide where the command bridge will go and so on, like, it just helps you to break down the, you know, the ratio, you know, when you're trying to interpret a photograph. This is all from photograph and napkin drawing, right? Okay, so this part here is what I'm working on now, and then if you want to sand this, it sands really well. And I like to use, well, all different kinds of grit, but to finish up, I use a 600 dry and then wet if I want to. And I'll just fold it like this. And if I want to clean up a nice, like a corner, nice, I just clean it up. It does it really, really well. Like I said, evergreen sands very nicely, and these are really nice finish. Any finish that you want, really, you can model in. Okay.